In part 2, we did a deep intonation confirming that the fret system and the bridge are in right relationship and that they are intonated. This allows us to check the nuts relationship with that system and identify any problems. In part 3, we're going to address those problems, and then we're going to take a deeper look into fret condition and string pressure. I hope you stay with us. If the nut is in the wrong place, what do you do with it? Okay, we have just intonated the guitar using the 1st fret to the bridge and the 13th fret as our midpoint of that string length being 1st fret to bridge, 13th fret being the midpoint of the string. So we've got that set up. We've got the bridge in the right spot relating to the frets themselves. This allows us to play a note on the 1st fret and get it true, and when we play the open string we can see what's going on with the nut. This guitar looks to be okay. If it was sharp, that means the nut is too far this way, maybe not the nut but the articulation point there, or the leading edge of the string. If the open note is flat, that means that the string is muting too far toward the headstock and this space is too big. Okay, so what do? We have determined that we have some kind of an intonation issue between the 1st fret and the nut. It may be sharp or flat. If it is sharp, before you do anything to the nut, we're going to check the height of the string in relation, coming off the nut in relation to the 1st fret. The 1st fret up, we have confirmed, we put a capo on it, the action is as low as it's going to get on your guitar, assuming a good setup. And the system of frets and bridge has been intonated. If the nut is in the right place and everything's working right, on the high E string, you're going to follow. If you have an F here, you've got an E here. If you've got a C here, you've got a B here. If you've got a G sharp here, you've got a G here. And those should be true. Now, to illustrate the point, I've taken my 1st string and I put it over the top of the nut so the action is quite high at the 1st fret. I'm going to play a note at the 1st fret. We have an F just like we should, but the E is very low because we are tensioning the string. We're moving the string a good deal to get it down to the fret, and it is tensioning that string. Now I'm going to put it back in the slot where the action is where it is supposed to be. And we have an F and we have an E. So you can see how much difference the height makes to the intonation in this area right here. Once you're at the 1st fret, the nut's out of the picture and the height doesn't matter. But for that 1st note, the string height coming off the nut matters greatly. Let me show you how to adjust that. Again, I'm going to pull out my trusty little capo, and I'm going to take a look. Since this guitar does not buzz, I'm going to take a look at how far with a capo on it that string is off the 1st fret. And I'm here to tell you it's really, really low. So you don't have to have the strings very high off the fret. I like to leave a little bit extra on that. So now what I've got here, and I don't know if you can see it, is about half again as much height off the fret as there is the 2nd fret when I push down on the 1st fret. Now, when you cut fret slots, be sure, if your intonation is right, that you cut them at an angle so that your string mutes off the end of the nut. You don't want to cut them flat. You don't want to hump them. You want them to be cut nice and even. And be sure to keep a good angle where the string falls away. I like to follow the angle of the string coming up to the nut with the slot so that I've got a nice even tension throughout the nut, and they wear better that way. If after you have adjusted the string height you still have an intonation problem between the 1st fret reference and your nut, then we can assume that there is something going on with the nut. Let's move on. If you have sharpness and the leading edge is too close to this fret, it's not too difficult to take a file and just back that up a little bit. I'd recommend doing each string individually and going very slow. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm telling you what you need to do. That's really about the only thing. Something else that can cause that, if the bridge is actually leaning forward, that can cause that, but you can still file that back. If the fingerboard has been cut too short and the nut is forward, filing it back will still take care of that issue. When you're doing that, always be aware of your slots. Make sure that they're good. Give them a check. Now, if the nut happens to be, or the string, open string happens to be flat, and this articulation point is too far back, the first thing you're going to want to check is your slots and make sure the strings are resting on the absolute edge of the nut and not resting someplace back farther, causing them to actually show more length than they need to for that nut. Make sure your slots are properly angled. Hopefully they're not too deep where you can re-angle them if that's the problem. If the nut is actually back too far, it may be leaning back, at which time just a reposition would take care of it. The fingerboard may have been cut too long, at which time possibly leaning it forward may take care of the problem. It may not. You may have to take the nut off and take a little material off the end of the fingerboard and put the nut back on. Again, always check to make sure, keep checking to make sure that your string is coming off the absolute edge of the nut, so that you have this length here only, that you're not articulating back into the nut. Okay, once we've determined that our nut is in the right place and we're still having some issues with in-tuneness as we're playing the guitar, one of the things that you want to look at with your guitar is where the string is articulating on the frets. Now, this is a set of very big frets, but they are very new, and the crown is right in the middle. As they wear, you get a long area where the string can articulate. So you can get the string, if you'll take a look at this, the distance between the frets is, I'm going to say, 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch. The distance of potential articulation on this fret is really almost 1/8 of an inch. So if you're articulating the note in the back of the fret, that's going to be quite flat. Articulating the note in the front of the fret is going to be quite sharp, and the center is the only place it is. So you want to take a look at the fret wear situation of the entire guitar. Now, another thing that you really ought to do, and I have not taken the time to do on this guitar for this video, is once you've got your guitar intonated, know that your nut's in the right spot. Just play every note on the guitar and see if it's in tune with the tuner, and note which notes are sharp and flat, and take a look specifically at those frets. This guitar happens to be new, so it's not having that issue, but as they age and the frets wear, you're going to have to recrown those, because if the fret is not articulating at the center, then you're going to have some in-tuneness issues based on fret wear. As we noted before, the player is one of the elements in playing in tune. I like to use very, very light strings. I also like to use very, very high frets, and I have had to develop a very light touch on the guitar. It is possible to make the guitar go sharp almost a half step just by string pressure. So if I want to use very light strings and big frets, I have to have a light pressure. If I want to play harder with my left hand, I have to go with heavier strings, lower frets, something like that. So that has to be a system that you come to. It's not going to come to you.